Hello, welcome to Old Virginia Homes. Today we'll be visiting a house that is actually two very different houses, connected by a diminutive passageway. Typically, as one's family and finances grow, houses are enlarged by subsequent additions, or the original house is encompassed by a larger, more spacious home. But this house remains two very distinct forms. The first, built in 1773, is a traditional colonial farmhouse, and the second, built in 1818, is a sophisticated classical revival, built in temple form. The structure looks like a snippet from a visual architectural timeline. Besides the small one-story connecting passageway, the exterior of both buildings remain independently defined. But the larger, later structure does overshadow the smaller home. Much like the men who lived here, father and son. Thomas Marshall, the father and the builder of the original farmhouse, was a surveyor, a soldier, and a frontier entrepreneur, successful in his own right, but overshadowed in history by his son, who would become Chief Justice John Marshall. Join me as we visit Oak Hill, an Old Virginia home in Delaplane. Let's go. Oak Hill is tucked between two Virginia vineyards. Like a peaceful landscape painting, the historic home is the focal point, grounded by green pastures and woods. In 1773, Colonel Thomas Marshall moved his growing family here from the Hollow, a more modest home nearby. The Hollow was built in 1764 by Thomas Marshall and is considered one of the oldest structures still standing in Fauquier County. And it was here that John Marshall lived, learned, and played from age 9 through 17. There were 5 children in the family when they moved to the Hollow. And if you'd like to see my video on that house, I'll provide a link at the end of this video. 5 more children were born at the Hollow before Thomas and his wife Mary decided they had stretched those walls as much as they could and moved again, this time to a larger and finer house called Oak Hill. Oak Hill began as a modest wood frame farmhouse in the Virginia colonial vernacular tradition. And although this original dwelling is much more spacious compared to the Hollow, it looks compact and workmanlike as it stands in quiet contrast to the later, more ambitious classical revival structure built 45 years later. This small passage joins generational dialogues, bridging our colonial past to the aspirations of our early republic. As with all plantation complexes, the houses and outbuildings are in constant need of upkeep and repair. Fortunately, Oak Hill is one of the properties that was carefully measured and recorded through drawings and photographs for the Historic American Buildings Survey, a project spearheaded in the 1930s by the Department of the Interior. These records are helpful tools in restoration, but they aren't perfect since these drawings are considered as-built, meaning they illustrate the existing condition of a building at the time of documentation, including any additions, alterations, and demolitions which may have taken place since the building was first constructed. For example, this Doric portico was added in the early 20th century and later removed. Fortunately, the current owner of the home, Chuck Chamberlain, found an old postcard written by a previous owner, Alvin Baird. The back reads, "I put these columns on the house in 1914. took them off 2 years ago, and the two houses are now in the same state they were in during the Chief Justice's life. The builder of this house, Thomas Marshall, was once considered the leading man of Fauquier, sitting in the House of Burgesses from 1761 to 1767, and as sheriff of the county. He later represented the county in the Assembly from 1769 to 1773, and sat as a member in 1775, supporting Patrick Henry in the convention that year. He also rose to the rank of colonel in the Revolutionary War and was said to have had 2 horses shot out from under him during the Battle of Brandywine. After the war, Thomas and his wife Mary sold 1,000 acres of the Oak Hill estate and moved their family to Kentucky. Thomas died in 1802, and Mary died 7 years later in 1809. As a puzzling aside, Mary's tombstone reads, "She was good, not brilliant, useful, not ornamental, and the mother of 15 children." So I'm not really sure that gives her the credit she's due. Anyway, John Marshall stayed on at Oak Hill, but once John established his Richmond law practice, he lived at Oak Hill only intermittently, and primarily lived at what is now a house museum, the John Marshall House, with his wife Mary, known as Polly, and their 6 children. The larger home at Oak Hill was built for John's firstborn son Thomas, who was a lawyer and delegate. Even after John officially moved to Richmond, he continued to return to the estate, using it as his country retreat, saying, "Here my affections as well as my interest remain, and all my sons are planted among you." John Marshall and his son Thomas both died within days of each other in 1835. Sadly, Thomas died in a freak accident on his way to his father's deathbed. Lightning hit a chimney, dislodging a brick and fracturing Thomas's skull. And it was then that Oak Hill became the property of Thomas's son John. These namesakes make for quite a confusing lineage, but this John Marshall, John II, was said to have lived the life of a scholar and literary gentleman while maintaining a generous and hospitable house. Too generous, apparently, as he was forced to sell Oak Hill to his younger brother, whose name was, of course, Thomas. This Thomas Marshall was a colonel in the Confederate Army and was killed in action in 1864. Oak Hill was then sold out of the Marshall family. Successive owners include the F.W. Maddox family, whose son then sold the estate to Mr. and Mrs. Alvin Baird in 1914. In 1965, it was acquired by Morris Marks and was a working farm. Oak Hill is now owned by Chuck Chamberlain, who continues to stabilize the structures on the property. He also has established the American Law Memorial here, which has the mission of raising awareness of the past, present, and future role of law and the legal community in defining and defending the United States of America. Thank you for visiting Oak Hill with me, an old Virginia home.